Okay, well, here we are in chapter 6 of the book of Revelations. This is the beginning of the opening of the seals. So the seven seals that are basically sealing up the seven chapters of this scroll or book that Christ is holding. Uh, he's going to start opening those in this chapter. We're going to start to see what are in these seals. So we're going to talk about what do these things represent? What do we see in them? Okay. Now, if you haven't watched chapter 4 and chapter 5, you might want to watch those videos first. The reason is they give some backstory and explanation, some context around this, especially chapter 5. Watch that one because that gives you the context of the love of God and what he wants the best for us. And that's a key thing to always remember as we learn about these, what's in these six seals, or these six chapters, if you will, of this book that Christ is about to open. So let's jump in and get talking about these in this chapter here. So verse 1, and I saw when the Lamb opened one of the seals, and I heard, as it were the noise of thunder, one of the four beasts saying, come and see. So this is probably, it says one of the seals. We could consider this the first seal opened. So if we think of them in a linear fashion, this is the first seal, or chapter 1 of the book. Now, Doctrine and Covenant section 77 is a revelation given to Joseph Smith for in the LDS Church, where they asked God a bunch of questions about the book of Revelations and got some answers from him. So I want to add those in here as well. So verse 7, what are we to understand by the seven seals which it was sealed? The answer, we are to understand that the first seal contains things of the first 1,000 years, and the second also of the second 1,000 years, and so on until the seventh. So that was the answer given to Joseph Smith, that each seal represents a period of time, an epoch of time, or a dispensation of time, if you will. And there's seven of these, so 7,000 years. This matches up with the concepts that we see in the books of Moses around creation. Creation took 7 days. Also, the idea of 1,000 years to man is a day to God. So this is like 7 days. God's doing his work. Does it literally mean 1,000 years? Maybe it could. Is it more metaphorical representation? Probably, honestly. So we can think, I would say think more symbolic than literal on these, because if you try, a lot of people try to say, oh, if that means they're 1,000 years each, then once we know, what is the date of the beginning, we can basically calculate out when the seventh seal will open. Are we in the seventh seal? Are we not there yet? Are we still in the sixth seal? Sometimes people try to use timing to exact out. If it's exactly 1,000 years, then we should be able to predict the timing of the sixth seal and the seventh seal, basically. But I don't think that lines up properly. I don't think it's exact as we wish it was when we look at this. So be careful taking it too literal. Most of what we see in the book of Revelations is definitely more symbolic. And what that does is make it hard to fully understand without interpretation. So we need to study and learn and understand it and seek the Spirit to go through it. But also, everybody has been able to try to interpret it as if it's their day and age. So just as the people in John's day are going to look at this and go, okay, what does this mean for our day and age? Now, how does this line up with things in our day and age? And we're going to discuss more of that as we go through this, because I think that gives us I think their day and age has some representation that helps us to understand the metaphor better. And then we want to look symbolically, what does that mean for our day and age? So let's look at this. Okay, now what's interesting, most Protestantism thinks of these as destructions or judgments. So the LDS see it as epochs of time, which we talked about in chapter 4, that others in ancient world, others in history, I should say, not so much the ancient world, but others in history have seen it as representing frames of time. But most commonly in Christianity today, they see it as each seal is a destruction, a judgment of God, basically, that'll happen before Christ comes. So like conquest, war, death, famine, these are all things, they're not epochs of time, they're all judgments that'll happen just before Christ comes. So that's another common way to look at that. So if we were to think about this idea as an epoch of time, as a 1,000-year period, we could see this first seal as around 4,000 to 3,000 ish BC. And I say ish because we could probably give at least a 500-year variance on either side of that to be literal. Okay, so it's a large enough gap that we're probably never going to get it fully right on the timing, honestly. So what happens in this one? There's going to be a lot of stuff that goes on. This one tends to represent war and conquering that's happening. So if this is 4,000 to 3,000 BC, we could say this is Adam and Eve up to probably the flood time frame is this first epoch of time, basically. Bruce R. McConkie was an LDS apostle and scholar who really encouraged and tried to study and promote this concept of the epoch of time. And so he said, the most transcendent happenings referred to in these verses involved Enoch and his ministry, which is pre-flood. And it is interesting to note that what John saw was not the establishment of Zion and its removal to heavenly spheres, but the unparalleled wars in which Enoch, as a general over the armies of the saints, went forth conquering and to conquer. That's his book, Doctrinal and New Testament Commentary. So again, you can look at this as these are just symbols of judgments, but some people look at this as an epoch of time as well. So I'm not here to tell you what to think, but give you some options so that you can think deeper and seek the Spirit of God to help you understand it better. Now, it's interesting here because this is one of the beasts saying with this loud, booming voice, like as of thunder, "Come and see." Others translate this as telling John to come, but to the horsemen to do their thing. So instead of "come and see, John, come here, check this out," they're looking at this going, what they're saying is, "Come here, John," and then telling these horsemen we're out to learn about to do their thing. So here is verse 2. Let's get into this. "And I saw, and behold, a white horse, and he that sat on him had a bow, and a crown was given unto him, and went forth conquering and to conquer." So that's all we get to describe the first seal. There's a white horse, and he sat on him, had a bow. Okay, so white horse usually means victory in battle. Usually the kings would come into back home riding on a white horse, victorious in battle. So victory of battle, he had a bow, so ability to reach people, to get out there, and a crown, so victorious. Went forth conquering and to conquer. So both of those are in there. So horses and cavalry riders, warfare, horse imagery appears a lot in Revelations in battle scenes as well. So fighting, bow is fighting as well as hunting also. So a lot that's happening here. We can think of this rider as representing worldly kingdoms who conquer otherworldly kingdoms, which means wars. The victors often destroy the losers. Most of Rome's enemies had mounted bowmen, and Rome had not adopted them yet, so this can bring up fears of Rome being conquered by an outside force. So when we think about it in the context of John's day and age, Rome's enemies were warriors riding on horses with bows. Rome had not adopted that strategy, that type of tactic yet. So, but their enemies did. So this could be representing in John's day and age, Rome being conquered by their enemies, which doesn't bode well for Rome, basically. If you think about it from a judgment standpoint, that doesn't go well for Rome. But this is a lot of conquering and destruction and wars. Now, we talked about in the last chapter, in chapter 5, we brought up what is worldly power and what is godly power. This is not godly power being used. So I would say it's maybe not judgments of God, but more likely wicked destroying the wicked. Hate and anger, they're against each other, is not the way of God. So these are people destroying each other, basically. So if we think about it from that standpoint, this is the wicked destroying the wicked. From a time standpoint, this is denoting lots and lots of wars, which if we read Enoch and into Genesis and things, lots of animosity and destruction and wars among the people pre-flood time frame, basically. Okay, verse 3, we're getting into the second seal. And when he had opened the second seal, I heard the second beast say, "Come and see." So now we're here. This is going to be around, if the first one was around 4000 to 3000 BC, this one's around 3000 to 2000 BC. Again, 500 years on either side of that. So it's not going to be exact. It's going to be far enough off that even in our lifetime, we can be off 1 or 2 full generations. And basically, so we can't predict very accurately what it is. But if we think about it as a time frame, this is probably the time frame that they're looking at. So verse 4, this is what was in this time frame. And there went out another horse that was red. So bloodshed is a common symbol for that. And power was given to him that sat thereon to take peace from the earth. So this is exerting more of a worldly power definition, to take peace. And that they should kill one another, and there was given unto him a great sword. That is this horse. So for Rome, a time of great peace in the nation was coming to an end with internal strifes and soon to be external forces. So that was what was happening. The time that Christ was on the earth corresponds with one of the absolute most peaceful times in Roman history. Rome, before Christ shows up, is just fraught with wars against other nations, and then even civil war breaks out. Practically 2 civil wars happen inside Rome before Christ comes along, and then we have that time of Augustus that ends up being seen as just like we don't know what happened, but for some reason during his reign, peace. There's a lot of peace. It happens to be the same time Christ is on the earth, the most peace in Rome happens. After Christ is gone, it starts to fall apart and go away. And Rome's not far away from being destroyed itself, if you think of the book of Revelations being written around 90 to 100 AD. So this is, from a standpoint of the people at the time, judgment, destruction is coming, would be the way to think about that from a justice standpoint. Widespread wickedness basically is happening. So taking peace from the earth can also be seen as a way of a form of judgment. So there's a judgment happening on these people. Peace is taken away. So not just lots of wars, but there's violence among each other, hatred, anger, theft, uneasiness happening all over the place as well. It's interesting because in Doctrine and Covenants section 1, verse 35, references something similar for LDS, that peace will soon be taken from the earth and Satan will be given his domain in the earth. I want to say it was Joseph F. Smith that said that was probably fulfilled probably around 1918 time frame. So it's getting worse since then, basically. But we can see that here. Now, also, Bruce R. McConkie made this statement, this is from the New Testament Study Manual first. As recorded in the scriptures, widespread wickedness and violence characterized this time period, which included the great flood during the days of Noah. As well, the rider of the red horse had power to take peace from the earth, and that they should kill one another. So we think of this time frame, so from the flood, time of Noah, the time of Abraham, and the wickedness and problems with Abraham and Isaac and Jacob, and that time frame as well is probably around this era. In Bruce R. McConkie's opinion, he said, "Who rode the red horse of war and bloodshed and sword, during the second seal? Perhaps it was the devil himself, for surely that was the great day of his power, a day of such gross wickedness that every living soul, save 8 only, was found worthy of death by drowning." That's the flood time period. Or if it was not Lucifer, perhaps it was a man of blood, or a person representing many murdering warriors, of whom we have no record. Suffice it to say that the era from 3000 to 2000 BC was one of war and destruction. So again, this is more violence. This isn't major kingdom wars. This is like internal strife, violence, person against person, lots of wickedness and destruction that's happening basically. So verse 5, we're now getting into the third seal. And when he had opened the third seal, I heard the third beast say, "Come and see." And I beheld, and lo, a black horse, and he that sat on him had a pair of balances in his hand. So this is the third horse that we've seen: a white horse, a red horse. White horse was the first seal, red horse was the second seal. Third horse is the black, or third seal is the black horse, basically, with these balances. So if we think of the third seal, again, if we're thinking judgment, this is probably getting into famine. The balances, judgment, equating, measuring, getting equality, justice for things. Probably famine, commerce type things, inflation, lots of economic problems as well. We can kind of read into this idea of the balances on this. From a time frame standpoint, this would then be somewhere 2000-ish to 1000-ish BC. So we're getting closer to King David time frame, all that stuff, judges and Samuel and those types of people as well. So verse 6, and I heard a voice in the midst of the four beasts say, so this is those four beasts that are around the throne of God, a measure of wheat for a penny, and 3 measures of barley for a penny, and see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. So definitely these measures, that when you bought stuff, they would put the food you want to buy on one scale, and you would put the money on the other scale, and the weight of the money and the weight of the food would balance. And that's how you paid enough, basically. So again, we're looking at commerce. This is trade. This is rationing things. This is dealing with like inflationary stuff, economics, other things like that. So a measure of wheat is about a quart. So that's a day's ration. Take a quart of flour, mix it with water and oil, bake it up into some bread. That's what you had to eat for the day. That was kind of a common ration back then. So what's interesting is, according to Wayment in his book, The New Testament, he said, the prices are considerably higher than usual and suggest inflated prices or prices that are a result of a famine or death. So we're seeing elevated prices. We're seeing problems, probably because there's a lack of food. So the price and the value has gone up. It does use the word penny for the monetary value on this. Now, a penny is in Greek, would be for Roman, would be a denarius. This is a day's wage, basically. So normally this would buy 16 quarts of wheat, but it's only buying 1 quart, according to verse 6. So for John's day and age, they'd look at this and go, holy cow, that's outrageous. That would be like going, okay, instead of $1 for a candy bar, it's $16 for a candy bar. That is massive inflation. That's hyperinflation. That's some problems. And it says in here too, 3 measures of barley for a penny. Barley was usually half as much as wheat, not 3 times. So there's, again, more problems. So there's a lot of economic strife and struggles and things that are happening with these people. So also when we look here in verse 6, let me pull up this quote. This is Greg Coaster's book, Revelation, talks about this. He said, this vision more probably reflects a common economic pattern. In the imperial world, a principal cause of food shortages was the air marking of vast quantities of grain to feed the city of Rome and the armies, while throughout the empire large areas are constituted to be diverted from the cultivation of cereals to the more profitable production of wine and olive oil. So that's what he says here, see thou hurt not the oil and the wine. So they diverted a lot of fields. Instead of producing grains to feed the people, instead of using the farms to produce food to feed all the people, they started producing farms to produce what the wealthy wanted, basically. So commerce changed, not to help the poor, but to help the wealthy. It followed the money. Some people made handsome profits in oil and wine, but reduced grain cultivation. That meant that when the harvest was meek or grain shipments were disrupted, many cities faced a food crisis. Some people exacerbated the problem by hoarding grain for their own use to sell at inflated prices. In John's vision, the economic forces that create such shortages and lead to hardship are allowed to have their way. Although some interpret distinct division Although some interpreters' distinct division refers specifically to a famine that occurred in 93 AD, the imagery is broader. So some people see it more specific, like the famine in 93 AD, which would have been about the time that John was writing this. But definitely lots of challenges here. So New Testament Study Manual also says a measure of wheat would feed an adult for a day and cost a penny under these famine conditions. Penny is translated from the Greek word denarion, which referred to a Roman coin that some estimate was worth a typical day wage of a laborer. A person could purchase only enough food to live on a day with a whole day's wages, indicating extreme famine prices. In contrast, barley was less expensive and was thus eaten by the poor. As recorded in scriptures, famines are characteristic of this time period. So again, this is 2000 to 1000 AD or BC time frame is what they're, if you think in time frames, that's where we're looking at for this third seal. But tremendous economic upheaval, tremendous problems. The wealthy are maintaining their status, the poor are getting poor and struggling to afford stuff. When economic challenges happen, when the weather changes, the food starts to run out, people start hoarding it. So this is that Master Mahan principle, if you think about it, that we've talked about a lot through the Old Testament, that it's the stuff that's more important than the people. I need to gather stuff to protect myself instead of how can I help other people out. So economics, money tends to distort things. If you have people that all make the same amount in the same area, they work together. They coordinate things and they tend to have some balance in their economics. When somebody comes in who has a lot more money, whether they gained it somewhere else or they found a gold mine or whatever, or somehow became more wealthy, they're willing to pay more for stuff. And so everybody else says, oh, I'm willing to sell you for more price. So the wealth starts to shift around, and then people start focusing on amassing the wealth. And so prices go up, and the economy changes to, instead of helping the people, to helping to amass wealth. And when that happens, tremendous inequality starts to build into the economy. And we're absolutely in that cycle ourselves. It eventually topples and falls apart. It's never not done that. You can study economic history all you want. It usually goes from some kind of a balanced level to the inequality, and the inequality gets worse until it eventually falls apart and collapses. It's never not done that, ever. So why should we be surprised if it happens again? I mean, honestly. So some good lessons for us even to learn from that seal by itself. Okay, so let's jump into the fourth seal, verse 7. And when he had opened the fourth seal, I heard the voice of the fourth beast say, "Come and see." Now this is interesting. We're going to see a little bit of a change here pretty soon, because there are only 4 beasts. Every one of them took their turn to say, "Come and see." But what do we happen because there's 7 seals? We're going to see that here in just a minute. So verse 8. So let's talk about the fourth seal for a second here. Okay. So from a time standpoint, that would put us around 1000 BC to 0 is the time frame we could think about in the fourth seal. If you're thinking in epochs of time, that's about the time that this would represent. Now, one thing that's important to understand about this idea of seeing this as an epoch of time is the concept of an epoch of time as we know it today. These year dates didn't exist when John wrote Revelations. This was something that was just invented a couple hundred years ago. Honestly, it's not that old of a time structure. They backdated it basically to try to get it to figure out. And part of that is why 0 is they try to get 0 around the time that Christ was born. They tried to use that. It's a Christian establishment. They tried to say, let's get from where we're at to here to zero, from where we're at to Christ to be, Christ was zero, and then we're building up, which means everything behind him is going from a bigger number down to zero. So we count down from Adam and Eve to Christ, and then up from Christ to his second coming. That's some of the logic behind building that framework. But again, it didn't exist when John wrote this. So he didn't write this from a standpoint of these time frames. That's a later understanding of this. And so it's hard to predict exactly how to denote these time frames. We can guess 1000 to 0 and kind of say, well, yeah, this kind of happened at that time. But I don't think it's holds up as well as we think. We can't take it as literal as we think, because it's 500 years on either side, which 1000 to 0 could be 1500 to 500 AD, which completely means, instead of being before the time of Christ, would encompass the time of Christ. So there's a lot of discrepancy in that, which is why timing the book of Revelations is extremely difficult, if not possible at all, basically. Okay, so let's look into what is in the fourth seal. Verse 8, and I looked and behold a pale horse, so different than a white horse, a pale horse, and his name that sat on him was Death. We now know the name of the rider. That's the first time we've seen that. And hell followed with him. And power was given unto them, so death and hell, over the fourth part of the earth, to kill with sword and with hunger and with death and with the beasts of the earth. So when we see this idea to kill, this can be translated disease, also can be in there. So this is being, if you think about it, this is really interesting. This is being used as a personification of death and hell, as if it's two people. So death is riding the horse, hell is following behind the horse. It's almost as if there's a personification of wickedness that is happening, basically. Wickedness, in a way, is a spiritual disease on the earth as well, so that we can see that interpretation in verse 8 also. Now, this can also show, when we think of the fourth of the earth, we can show the amount of widespread destruction. Okay, so it's interesting to think of a quarter of the earth, so that's 25% of the earth. That's a large part of population. So massive problems for a lot of people. Death and destruction, disease, famines for a whole lot of the population. A 25% drop in population is a huge drop in population. I mean, that changes the economy of an area easily. But what's interesting, and I hadn't thought about this till I got studying this more, is it's not the whole earth. There is a limitation to the wickedness. Isn't that fascinating? Only 25%. There's a limitation to the wickedness, a temporariness to the wickedness that we can even interpret and see in verse 8. So really interesting that we see this. Now, in Greg Coaster's book Revelations, he had something to say about this verse as well. He said, theologically, Revelation works with a tension. The threats represented by the horsemen are not directly imposed by God, yet seem subject to God. Some interpreters emphasize the role of divine restraint of evil. They understand conquest, civil strife, the attendant food shortages, and death to be products of human sin, not divine action. The Lamb does not bring war and violence into existence by opening the seals, but shows that they are subordinate to the purposes of God, who limits the third horseman by protecting the oil and wine, and then confining death's sphere of operation to only a fourth of the earth. So we can see in here, while these are the seals holding the will of God, basically, this isn't so much God going, okay, now I'm going to go down and my armies of God are going to go down and destroy people. That's a worldly power philosophy. What we're seeing is the wicked are being allowed to destroy the wicked. God is allowing them to have their own justice on each other, basically. But they're limited in what they can do by God's power as well. So only enough justice to get done what he needs done and no more. He doesn't let this rampant justice go crazy. He gives just enough to get the people to start repenting and improving, and then he pulls back on it. Others argue that the Lamb unleashes the threats. He does not merely curb them. The horsemen are given a victory, wreath, sword, and authority to act, which implies that their ability to work comes from God. Since God is just, however, one might assume that he affects only the wicked and not the righteous, who are sealed and protected. Still, others observed that it is not clear that the righteous are exempted from the threats posed by the seals. So one might conclude that the afflictions come on all people. The difference is that they purify the faithful while punishing the ungodly. If you remember, I mentioned at the beginning of this, you should watch chapter 5 because it denotes the love of God and how Christ learned through suffering, and why would that not be different from us? Thus, through these seals, we're seeing that when God is involved, the suffering is bad for the wicked, but turns good for the righteous because he uses it to purify them in their faith. So the difference is that they purify the faithful while punishing the ungodly. An alternative is to recognize that the seal visions do not explain why there is suffering. In the worldview of the apocalypse, multiple forces are at work. Ultimate authority belongs to God, but the forces of evil which are in rebellion against God also operate in the world. People cannot always tell whether a threat comes from God, from Satan, or from human sin. Instead of offering explanations, the visions in Revelation 6 address the readers as a form of proclamation. They are designed to unsettle complacent readers like those at Sardis and Laodicea, who may be loaded into a false sense of security by social and economic conditions that are favorable to them, reminding them that the present order will not continue forever. So if you remember Laodicea and Sardis, the messages to those churches was basically, you guys are getting complacent, you're getting weak in your faith, therefore you're not keeping the commandments, therefore judgments, you need to repent, or judgment comes, which will definitely encourage you to repent. So at the same time, the visions give the oppressed, like those at Smyrna, incentive to persevere with confidence at the veneer of peace, which enables those with influence to threaten them will be taken away. So that's, Greg Koester talks about that, which is a really cool way to think about these ideas, that this isn't major judgments that God is going, bam, we're going to slam you with justice, bam, slam you again, bam, slam you again. This is realizing that there's the tension of good and evil. Okay, in chapter 5, we learn of the goodness of God, the love of God. He wants his plan out there, but there are rules with justice and other things that have to be dealt with, which is where the atonement comes in to give mercy. So as Christ is opening these seals, he's revealing the wickedness of the people is causing a lot of problems. So God will limit the wickedness effects. He will help those who are helping him, and he will let those who are not following him have the justice that comes because of their choices. So a really cool way to think about these seals, not as for epochs of time as much as, although I think you could interpret those, and many people have done it over centuries, but from a metaphorical standpoint of understanding that wickedness is bad, wickedness is rampant, but is also limited by God. And the difference between those who suffer and those who don't is predominantly those who, or those who overcome the suffering, I should say, and who have to deal with it, is righteousness. Now, being righteous doesn't mean you don't get to suffer. It means that through your suffering, your next life, the spiritual life, will be better if you allow Christ to help you through that. So we have to take our life and infuse Christ into it to get the benefit that God's going to do. We're still going to suffer, but it will be better in the long run for us because of that. Fascinating dynamic that we see in these tensions and paradoxes here in Revelations. So Another thought on verse 8 as well is, as recorded in the scriptures, great warring empires characterize this era. So we think again, the epoch time, this is the time of Assyria, Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Greece, Rome. Having rejected the warnings of prophets such as Isaiah, Jeremiah, and Amos, the kingdom of Israel and Judah often found themselves victims of these conquering empires. Israel and Judah also fought against one another in those times. So there was a lot of war and conquest and challenges from famines and destructions and wickedness in that time frame as well. Okay, let's go to verse 9 here. Now this is where we see a difference. And when he had opened the fifth seal. And if you notice, the four beasts said, come and see for the first four, but now we're in the fifth seal. They didn't say anything. The fifth seal, I saw under the altar the souls of them that were slain for the word of God, for the testimony which they held. And I'm going to pause there for a second. They're going to say something here in the next verse, but let's look at this verse first. Verse 9, okay? So the first four seals got 2 verses each. The fifth seal is going to get 3 verses, so we're going to get more information about this seal. So there's, hopefully you can kind of tell there's a delineation, okay? Now we're in the fifth seal. There's a difference, okay? And if you think from the time, the epoch time, the fifth seal would have been 0 to 1000 AD. So this is the time that John had his revelation, the time that he's living in. And what's interesting, just to kind of go along this, so the first 4 seals got 2 verses each. The fifth seal is going to get 3 verses each. The sixth seal, 23 verses, and the seventh seal, 45 verses. Just to let you know, there's a lot of most of what we're going to hear is about the 6th and 7th seal, basically. So there's a lot more information about these seals. So if from the epoch time, the first 4 seals are way in the past for John, the 5th seal would be the present for John, and the 6th and 7th are the future for John and his people. So that's what we see in here. Okay, so now when we're looking at this, there's an altar. So this is sacrifice. This is temple, okay? And the souls of them that were slain for the word of God and for the testimony which they held. Another way to say that is martyr. Martyrs who are under the altar of God. So they are there, they have been killed, they've been sacrificed, and now they are pleading with God. So this is, if you think about even the epoch of time, 0 to 1000, this is the early Christianity, this is the persecutions of Nero, this is all the other persecutions of Diocletian and others, Domitian and them, that happen through there. This is the martyrdom of people like Perpetua and others, the martyrdom of the Christians. Then we also have Christianity coming out of obscurity and being more normalized through Constantine in the 4th century. And then we have the divisions, the start, Orthodox and the Catholic and Oriental churches split off and things. And there's other martyrdoms and persecutions and challenges that happen there as well. So that's that time frame. So Greg Koester actually made this comment. He said, by the time Revelation was written, Antipas had been killed at Pergamum. Other sources said that Stephen was stoned, James was killed with a sword, Peter was crucified, and Paul was beheaded. The most notorious persecution occurred under Nero, when Christians in Rome were torn by dogs and perished, or were nailed to crosses, or were doomed to the flames and burnt. Now Eusebius talks a lot about that. We get a lot of details from him. So what that's talking about is when Nero was persecuting the saints. So this is the mid-60s AD time frame, like 60 to 64 AD basically, as he persecuted them because he blamed them for the great fire in Rome that actually we all believe now that there's a good chance that Nero caused himself, but then blame the Christians for. They would bring him in, they would put animal hides on him, and then let wild dogs go and just eat the people, destroy them, rip them apart. They nailed them to crosses to crucify them as well, just like they did to Christ, the leader of the Christians. And also, this is really despicable, but Nero used the Christians as torches for nighttime. So if you got used as a torch, you were tied to a pole and lit on fire and burned to death so that you could light the streets at night in Rome. Holy cow, that's crazy. I mean, that is just wild. That's some of the stuff that they faced under Nero. And then there was more later that happened, and other executions and things that happened also. So these kinds of traditions informed this division of the fifth seal, is what Greg Koester is getting at, basically. So now let's hear what these martyrs are saying. Verse 10. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? Now let's look at what they're saying here, okay? The title Lord is different from that used in the majority of the instances in the New Testament. So it says the word Lord, but when we get back into like Greek, it's different, okay? This word means master or leader according to Wayment in his book, The New Testament. So instead of Lord as in my Lord, I am your servant, this is talking about you're the leader, you're the master. Why are you not doing something about this? Is kind of more the emphasis that's used in when he says that. They say that here. So these guys, these are the martyrs. They're seeking justice. They're seeking retribution. Basically, they want, how long are you going to tolerate the wickedness that has destroyed us and killed us? So here's verse 11. And white robes were given unto every one of them. And it was said unto them that they should rest yet for a little season, until their fellow servants also and their brethren that should be killed as they were should be fulfilled. Now that's interesting. They ask God a question. Why are you not stopping this? Why are you not doing something about this? Why does it seem like the wicked are getting away with killing all of us Christians? And what happens? Well, they're given white robes. Those who died are given white robes, which means the purity, holiness, cleansing that they are given, innocence that they have. And then they're told, take it easy, man, rest. The martyrdom's not done yet. Have some patience with this. There are still more martyrdom that needs to happen. That was the answer. That was what the answer was. So we find later that those who do not follow God won't find much rest in this world or the next. So as we get into subsequent chapters, we'll see that contrast with what they're given white robes and told to rest. Hey, look, they can't touch you here. Your test is done. You're safe. You're okay. But for the wicked, it's not okay. It's going to be, if you remember, we talked about this, I think in chapter 5, the lamb and the lion type concept. You want to have the lamb greet you, not the lion greet you. And the wicked are going to get the lion, not the lamb. So it's interesting that in a way, there's almost a duality here. Either you follow God or you don't follow God. That's kind of the contrast that has here. There's almost this, there's only two options. You either follow God or you don't follow God. That's kind of where we're at. So that's the choice that we have to make in our life as well, basically. Now, when it does say in here in verse 11, and their brethren, that they should be killed, it's a generic Greek term for everyone. So women can be martyrs and be seen as this. So this is really interesting to think about. There is an amount of people who will be killed, and the amount is already known, is a common way to interpret this verse. There is no number given, and usually the focus is on people being righteous. The best way to think about this is God will finish his work against the wicked once the righteous are finished witnessing to the truth. So that's what they're saying. There's people who have to do witnessing, and because they're witnessing, the wicked are killing them. Yes, that is bad for those people to die in brutal ways and have these terrible things, but they will stand as witnesses against the wicked. It's going to go bad for the wicked. The righteous are going to be saved in the long run. So it's an interesting contrast, and it's known there's a limit to this. Again, do you see that thread? There's a limit to the wickedness that's going to happen. Not everybody's going to die, but there is a certain amount that will be allowed to die, and then no more. Isn't that interesting? There's a limit that God has put on the destruction of his people. He's still allowing the wicked to do what they want because he's letting them use their agency, which is going to condemn them in the day of judgment. It's God that has to work out those things, not us. We're asked to forgive everybody. We're asked to have mercy on everybody. God deals with the justice side, not us. Always remember that. Okay, verse 12. And I beheld when he had opened the sixth seal. So now we're in the sixth seal. And lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood. And the stars fell unto the earth, even as a fig tree casteth her untimely figs, when she is shaken of a mighty wind. So let's get into this. This is the sixth seal. Now we're going to get a lot. There's a lot we're going to talk about here. So section 77 of the Doctrine and Covenants, verse 10, they ask about this seal in this revelation. So the question was, what time are the things spoken of in this chapter to be accomplished? The answer was, they are to be accomplished in the 6,000 years, or the opening of the sixth seal. Doctrine and Covenants section 29 and 45 also give a similar prophecy of this idea of the sixth seal being opened. So if we think in a time frame around this, we're probably looking around 1000 AD to 2000 AD. Now again, if you try to make this sound like, oh, this is absolute, at the year 2000 we switched to the seventh seal, yeah, it's not that clear. You can't be that exact with this, because again, the whole timing thing that we're using was made up by men just a couple of hundred years ago. It didn't even exist when John wrote this. So you've got to give at least 500 years on either side. So that means the sixth seal could be from 500 AD to 1500. Or you could say it's from 1500 to 2500 AD, which means we still have 500, just under 500 more years to go in the sixth seal. So these swings of time are large enough that they easily span way more than our lifetime. So it's hard to say, are we in the sixth seal? Are we in the seventh seal? We don't know. It tries to equate this to around our day and age in this timing convention. But again, if you think in a 500-year swing in either side, we could be well into the seventh seal already, which doesn't make any sense. When we read the seventh seal, it doesn't line up with what we're doing. But it also can mean our great grandchildren will still be around when that seal finally transitions to the seventh seal. So it's hard to pin it down and to say it's within our lifetime. So just be careful with the people that are trying to guess when these seals have opened. Oh, it must have opened in 2000, so now we're in the seventh seal. It doesn't line up with that. And so you've got to be careful with that, okay? It doesn't match up as well as we think it does. There's a lot of assumptions, these logical leaps that people have to make to try to make those conclusions work. And they just don't tell you about those logical assumptions and leaps. You have to think about it and realize, oh, they just made an assumption. There's no proof of that. So that already puts their premise on a false setting. So let's examine verse 12 a little bit more, okay? This 1,000-year period will continue until just before Jesus Christ returns in glory and reigns personally on the earth. John noted 7 signs that will accompany his time period: an earthquake, the darkening sun, the moon becoming as blood, stars falling, the heavens opening as a scroll, mountains and islands moving out of their places, and men seeking to hide themselves. Similar signs of the times are recorded elsewhere in Scripture, like Joel chapter 2, Haggai chapter 2, D&C 29, D&C 43, D&C 88. 7 groups of men are also identified in these verses: kings, great men, rich men, chief captains, mighty men, bondmen, and free men. The number 7 suggests completeness or wholeness. No enemies of God will escape his wrath in the last days. That's the New Testament study guide that I'm quoting from there. So we all really think it's commonly looked at that the 7th seal is when Christ comes. It didn't open in 2000 because Christ hasn't come yet. So it might be safer to think the other direction, but that means Christ probably won't come for another 500 years from now or thereabouts. So there's a big ish in there, basically, so we can't really know where that timing is. But we can see that the challenges is a lot of moving, a lot of changing, earthquakes happening, sun becoming black, moon becoming as blood, stars of heaven falling to earth, uh, a fig tree losing her fruit in a strong wind, weather disruptions, weather patterns, weather changes, uh, things that were sure that we thought had strong foundations are now being broken up. Mountains collapsing, rocks splitting. Everything is in commotion, tumultuousness. That's the that's what this time frame that most likely we live in today is dealing with. And you got to admit, since COVID, holy cow, has everything felt like it's in commotion. Everything feels like the timing is off. We're not quite lining up anymore. So we probably are in the sixth seal still, and it's just exacerbating and getting worse until we reach the seventh seal. Greg Koester had a comment on this one as well. He said, the earthquake signals God's coming judgment. People understood that dreams of earthquakes and landslides pretend harm for all people and the destruction of themselves or of their property. They were signs of divine displeasure. Israel's tradition told of the world shaking in the presence of God. His descent made Mount Sinai quake. At God's judgment, the earthquakes, the heavens tremble. The sun and the moon are darkened, and the stars withdraw their shining. In Revelations 2, the earthquake warned of God's coming judgment, and the final earthquake on Babylon brings it about. So lots of tumultuousness, lots of shaking, preparing for coming impending judgment is the symbol, basically. Now, a lot of people, again, try to understand, like, what is this? What earthquake could this be? And people try to predict, oh, it was this great quake. It was the quake in Japan. It was this quake over here. It was the large quake before Mount Vesuvius erupted, or whatever. We don't know. I would say it's more metaphorical. Now, there were some big earthquakes and challenges they had back then as well. If you think about it, it hadn't been, let's see, Vesuvius was Pompeii and all that destruction was, I think, in the 70s AD, 80s AD time frame. So you got to realize in 70 AD, Jerusalem was leveled by Rome and destroyed. Temple absolutely obliterated, tons of Israelites killed. Christians kind of went into hiding a little bit, but now they're being persecuted with the Romans because they won't worship the rulers, basically. But if you think about an earthquake and then the sun becoming black and the moon becoming blood, that could be a lot of volcanic activity spewing stuff into the air and causing disruptions and things. So we could easily see that looking at what happened to Pompeii in that time frame as well. So these are all ominous signs in the Greco-Roman world of divine wrath, basically. So coming judgment is what they're going to be thinking of, basically. That's what they're looking at. So also in verse 13, we can see this, the stars falling from heaven. This was a common sign of death and destruction. The spirit withdraws and the wickedness reigns, basically. That's kind of what we're seeing in verse 13, some metaphors there. Now it's interesting, in section 88, verse 87, the Doctrine and Covenants for LDS, it says, for not many days hence, remember this is in the 1800s, for not many days hence, and the earth shall tremble and reel to and fro as a drunken man, and the sun shall hide his face and shall refuse to give light, and the moon shall be bathed in blood, and the stars shall become exceedingly angry, and shall cast themselves down as a fig that falleth from off a fig tree. So this is, in 88 even says, it's coming soon when this is all going to happen. So we can think of this as, from a physical sense, lots of major natural disasters, earthquakes, tectonic shifts, lots of things happening that way, of natural occurrences of things. But also we think of spirituality. As the spirit leaves, as God withdraws his spirit because the wicked are too wicked, more wickedness happens, more commotion, more destruction that is there. Now, I like this because this really connects in with the idea of Enoch. So in Enoch's day, pre-flood, he saw in vision that the earth was in great commotion. There was tsunamis, there was volcanic activity, there was earthquakes, a lot of commotion and challenges that they were facing back in the pre-flood days. He saw in his vision that the earth was in commotion in response to the wickedness of the people. So as the people became more wicked, the earth, what we would call the ecosystems of the earth, Mother Earth, became more tumultuousness. Animals became more violent and attacked more people and more angry and things, more vicious. The natural elements became in greater commotion, more earthquakes and disasters and hurricanes and tornadoes and all kinds of stuff going on as well increased. So this is an interesting point to think about because it gets us thinking about the idea of climate change. In a way, climate change may be caused by wickedness, not carbon in the atmosphere. Carbon in the atmosphere might be a scientific or logical understanding of change, but we could see this from a spiritual standpoint and say that as the world gets more angry, as the world adds more hate and resentment, the elements are going to get more commotion, more tornadoes, more storms, more extreme weather, more problems because the people are wicked. So in that sense, yes, humans are causing climate change, absolutely. But it's not because of carbon emissions, it's because of lack of spirituality, lack of spirit, more wickedness, basically. So some cool analogies that seem to fit with this same time frame, which again, this should be the time frame we're living in today, basically. Verse 14 now, and the heaven departed as a scroll when it is rolled together. Now I want to pause for just a second right there. Let's just think about that for a second, okay? The act of rolling up a scroll will signal the end of a story or an account. Okay, Wayman in his book, The New Testament, talks about that. So when you're done reading it, you roll it up. The story is done. The play, the act, whatever you're doing is done. You're rolling it up. So as the heaven departs, it's time to roll that up. That chapter, that part's done. Now, many scholars translate this to mean that the sky disappears, like the words of a scroll going away when you roll it up. Many apocalyptic writers use this to signal the end of an age. So it's not so much like literally the earth goes flat and turns into a scroll, and the heavens suddenly disappear type idea, but it's more of a symbol. It's more of a metaphor to say that it's the end of an age when that happens. Every mountain and island were moved out of their places. Now, this is interesting that mountains and islands, so big land masses where the mountains are and land masses out away from everywhere with the islands, everything is getting affected by these natural disasters, basically. Everything's there. They're going to be moved out of their place. What happens to get an island to move out of its place? Earthquakes. That's tectonic movements. Verse 15, and the kings of the earth and the great men and the rich men and the chief captains and the mighty men and every bondsman and every free man hid themselves in the dens and in the rocks of the mountains. So 7 types of men were talked about, all different classes. So complete population, everybody is fleeing, everybody's hiding. Those who felt secure in the world are not so secure when God comes. Basically, when the judgment's about to be pronounced, hey man, no one is going to feel safe, especially those who are not repentant. They're going to be really worried. In fact, verse 16, and said to the mountains and rocks, fall on us, hide us from the face of him that sitteth on the throne, from the wrath of the Lamb. This is a fascinating verse. I love this verse. It's so interesting to look at. These people are obviously not keeping the commandments, but these people would rather have mountains fall on top of them to hide them from God than change. They could repent. They have choice. They could say, oh, I need to change. I need to forgive others. I need to be kind and charitable to others. I need to repent of my sins. They're not repenting. They're hiding from God. I hope you start to see that, okay? Wrath does not cause people to repent. Wrath solidifies their choice. Are they going to follow God or are they not? Wrath gets the fence sitters off the fence. So when wrath and judgment from God come, it's to get the fence sitters to move so that everybody has the definitive side that they're on. Are you following God or are you not? There's that duality again. That's what it's about. And some will not change. They would rather be crushed by a mountain and try to hide from God under an entire mountain range than change to follow God. That's their choice. That's their choice. And why is this? Because of verse 17, for the great day of his wrath is come, and who shall be able to stand? So the wicked are not going to have a white robe and will be standing with the righteous at this time. Okay, wrath is coming, which means for the wicked, this is the lion. The lamb will take care of the righteous. The lion is going to take care of the wicked. That's Christ in both roles. So the question of standing interrupts this larger theme of the seals being opened. The answer shows a pause in the opening of the seventh seal. In fact, this is a significant thing we're going to see when we get into the next chapter, which again throws off the whole idea of this timing concept. Because now the question is, again, here at the end of the sixth seal that they're describing is, in the end of this chapter, is who shall be able to stand? If you're standing when Christ comes, you're not afraid. You're welcoming him. You're there to be present for him. Who will be worthy to stand? That's the righteous. So we're going to see more from them as we get into the next chapter. So we'll see you over there.